Hello, and welcome to my channel Stories of Injustice. A firefighter saves 3 kids from a burning house, only to be thrown to the ground and handcuffed by the cops who showed up next. No questions. No thanks. Just metal on his wrists. But what the police didn't know, his radio was still on, and it was recording everything. What started as a rescue turned into a national reckoning. Death threats, FBI raids, a hidden network exposed, and one man, Marcus Lane, who refused to stay silent. Stick around, because what happens in the next 10 minutes, it'll change the way you see justice, uniforms, and the quiet power of standing your ground. This isn't just a story. It's the beginning of something bigger. Watch to the end. You'll see why. Marcus Lane was the kind of man who didn't just clock in, he showed up. Every shift, every call, every life that needed saving. At 38, he wasn't the loudest guy in the room, but he was always the one others looked to when things got real. 12 years as a firefighter in Edgewater, Texas, and he still treated every morning like it was his first day. Jacket pressed, boots polished, helmet spotless. He liked things clean, ordered. That's just how he was wired. The station was a red brick rectangle nestled between a shuttered diner and a feed store that hadn't sold actual feed in years. There was a single basketball hoop out back, where the younger guys sometimes blew off steam, and a cracked vinyl couch inside the break room that no one could bring themselves to throw out. Marcus always sat in the corner chair, the one with the loose armrest and view of the front bay doors. Routine. Familiarity. It mattered to him. Edgewater was the kind of town where time didn't move so much as it ambled. Population 18,632 if you counted the dogs. A water tower with chipped paint. A courthouse clock that ran 5 minutes slow. High school football on Fridays, church on Sundays, and gossip in between. It was the kind of place that liked its traditions tight and its change quiet. Marcus had grown up just outside city limits, in a trailer on a gravel road with no name. His mother had worked 2 jobs, sometimes 3. His father, he didn't talk about. What people remembered about young Marcus was that he always carried a book, kept his shoes clean, and never once missed the school bus. Not once. He got into firefighting because of an article he read in 9th grade about a black firefighter in Chicago who'd pulled a baby out of a burning apartment and went right back in for the dog. Marcus had clipped that article, taped it to the wall above his bed, and stared at it every night until he graduated. He never wanted to be famous. He just wanted to be useful. And in Edgewater, being useful as a black man came with limits. At the firehouse, he was respected. Enough. The older guys liked him because he didn't complain. The younger ones followed his lead because he always had a plan. But there were lines, unspoken, invisible until you touched them. He never got invited to poker nights. Never got asked to speak at the town's annual Memorial Day ceremony, even though he'd pulled more bodies out of wreckage than any of them. He knew what it was. He accepted it. Not because he liked it, but because he had work to do. His days started early, up by 4:30. He liked the quiet before the world turned on. He'd run 2 miles, shower, then drive his old F-150 into town. Always parked in the same spot, second from the end, near the hydrant. He kept a thermos of black coffee in his locker and a photograph of his mother folded into his wallet. She had passed the year he made lieutenant. He never got to tell her, but he carried her with him every shift. The firehouse was his second home, and he treated it like one. He fixed what broke, replaced what wore out, sometimes paid for supplies out of his own pocket. He never told anyone. It wasn't about credit. It was about responsibility. Edgewater didn't get a lot of action. The occasional kitchen fire. A barn blaze now and then. Most of the calls were car wrecks and gas leaks. But Marcus stayed sharp. Checked his gear 3 times. Ran drills even when nobody wanted to. Because the thing about fire, it doesn't care if you're ready. It just comes. On slow days, Marcus read. Not novels, but manuals, new rescue techniques, safety codes, anything that made him better. The others teased him, called him Professor. He didn't mind. They'd call him when things got serious. He kept a logbook. Every call. Every shift. Not because he had to, but because someday, he told himself, the truth might matter. And the truth, when written down, couldn't be twisted or forgotten. So when the bell rang on a quiet Wednesday morning and dispatch called out a structure fire with children inside, Marcus didn't hesitate. He grabbed his gear, slid into the driver's seat of engine 3, and hit the sirens. What he didn't know, what no one knew, was that before the day ended, the town that had shaped him, overlooked him, and silently doubted him, would have to reckon with a man they never really saw. Not until it was too late. The first thing he saw was the smoke. Thick, dark, rising in a furious column above a cluster of trees near the end of a cul-de-sac. It wasn't just a kitchen fire. This was bigger. This was bad. Marcus gripped the wheel tighter. His left arm itched beneath the sleeve of his turnout coat. The smell of burning insulation hit his nose before he even saw the house. Engine 3 roared up to the curb with a growl of brakes. He leapt out, radio clipped to his chest, helmet already on. The house was a two-story colonial, white siding, black shutters, a little American flag drooping near the front door. The front windows glowed orange. Flames flickered through the broken glass on the second floor. A woman stood screaming on the lawn, her hands over her mouth. My babies. My babies are inside. Marcus didn't wait. He shouted into his radio. Structure fire confirmed. Multiple miners reported inside. Beginning entry. Engine 3 on scene. Solo. No response. The second engine was still out. Fuel line issue. He was alone. He hit the front door with his shoulder. It gave under the pressure, swinging inward to a wall of heat. Smoke rolled over him like ocean water. He dropped low. Crawled. His flashlight cut through the haze. Edgewater fire. Call out. Nothing. Then, a whimper. He followed it. A boy, maybe 6, under the dining table. Eyes wide, clutching a stuffed bear. Marcus scooped him up, wrapped him in his coat, and turned back. Out the door. Into the daylight. The mother screamed. Marcus handed the child to her without a word. Spun on his heel. Back in. The heat was worse. Sweat poured down his back. The air was thick, every breath like swallowing cinders. He climbed the stairs 2 at a time. The house groaned around him. He found the second child in a bedroom closet. Girl, maybe 10, curled up with her arms over her head. He pulled her out gently, shielded her with his body as the hallway ceiling buckled. Down the stairs. Fire snapped at his heels. Outside again. The girl coughed and cried. Her mother sobbed, clutching both kids. Neighbors had gathered now. Phones out. Shouting. One kid left. Back in. Marcus didn't think. He just moved. He made it to the far bedroom. Found the toddler in a laundry basket, wrapped in a blanket. Barely conscious. The roof groaned. Time was running out. He wrapped the child in his arms. Turned toward the hall. The ceiling collapsed behind him as he passed. Debris rained down. Something hit his shoulder hard. He didn't stop. He burst through the door as the second floor gave way with a roar. The house shrieked behind him. Marcus stumbled onto the lawn, cradling the child. His left arm burned. His jacket smoldered. He knelt, gasping. The child in his lap, alive. The crowd screamed in relief. And that's when the sirens arrived. But they weren't from the firehouse. A black and white cruiser skidded to a stop at the curb. Sheriff's Department. Deputy Travis Crowley. Marcus looked up, blinking through the smoke. Crowley stepped out, hand already on his weapon. Marcus raised a hand. Firefighter. Lane. Engine 3. Crowley didn't blink. Hands where I can see them. Marcus froze. I said, hands up. The crowd erupted. People screamed. He saved them. Crowley shouted again. Don't make me ask twice. Marcus slowly lifted his hands. And that's when he felt the cuffs snap tight. The child was pulled from his arms. And Marcus Lane, the man who ran through fire 3 times to save children, was face down in the dirt. Somewhere behind him, his radio crackled. Still live. Still recording. The cuffs bit into his wrists, metal searing against skin already burned and blistered. Gravel pressed into his cheek as Deputy Crowley pinned him to the ground with a knee in his back. The pain was sharp, but Marcus didn't cry out. He just stared at the dirt, breathing in the scent of scorched grass and ash, hearing the cries of children and their mother behind him. Don't move, hero, Crowley sneered, yanking Marcus upright by the shoulders. Hope your little act was worth it. The crowd was in chaos. Someone shouted, he's a firefighter. He just saved those kids. He's in full gear, you moron, a woman screamed. Crowley didn't care. He shoved Marcus toward the cruiser like a sack of trash. The back door opened, and he threw him in without a word. Marcus's helmet rolled off his lap and hit the floor. The door slammed. The cruiser reeked of old sweat and cheaper freshener. Marcus sat in silence, the weight of the moment crushing him. Through the window, he saw one of the children being loaded into an ambulance. Another clung to their mother, reaching out for him. The drive to the sheriff's station was short but brutal. Crowley never spoke directly to him, but muttered under his breath the entire way. Damn shame. Thought we cleaned this town up. I bet he's got a cousin who lit the fire himself. Let him run into flames and call it courage. Still just another thug in a suit. Marcus said nothing. When they arrived, Crowley yanked the door open and hauled him out. Marcus staggered but didn't fall. His arms were still cuffed tightly behind his back. Inside, the treatment got worse. They didn't take him to a booking desk. They took him through a side door, away from cameras. The room smelled like old coffee and mildew. One of the other deputies, thin, red-faced, maybe late 40s, laughed when he saw Marcus. "This the fireman?" "Yeah," Crowley chuckled. "Hero of the day." The red-faced deputy leaned in close. "You know, I didn't think we let you people in uniform unless it's marching band or kitchen duty." They threw him into a holding room. Not gently. The bench was cold steel, the walls a dull gray. No water. No medical attention. Not even a question. Someone closed the door behind him and muttered, "Should have let the house burn." Marcus stared ahead. His shoulder throbbed. His arm was beginning to blister badly under the gear. He could still feel the weight of the toddler he carried. Still hear the collapse of the roof. But more than that, he heard the silence. Nobody came. No one checked his ID. No one called his supervisor. They left him alone for hours. At one point, he heard laughter from the hallway. Someone was telling a story. Yeah, and then this guy rolls out like he owns the damn town. Kids in his arms like some kind of savior. I'm like, slow down, superhero. A roar of laughter followed. Another voice chimed in. I bet he lit the fire himself just to get on TV. More laughter. Then silence. Marcus looked down at his wrists. The metal cuffs had cut into the burned skin. Blood had dried into the creases of his gloves. He shifted, slowly, carefully. Every movement hurt. But he wasn't going to lie down. He wouldn't give them that. Not when he'd spent his life earning everything. Respect, trust, the right to be seen as a man. And not when, with one ignorant act, they tried to strip it all away. Hours passed. The sun dipped below the horizon. The light changed. Still no one came. Finally, the door opened. But it wasn't medics. It wasn't his captain. It wasn't justice. It was the same two deputies, laughing like they were back at a bar. Crowley tossed a paper cup at his feet. There's your water. Don't say we don't treat our guests right. The other deputy pointed at Marcus's charred jacket. Guess next time, stay in your neighborhood. Marcus stared at him. No anger. Just a look that made the man go quiet. He bent down, picked up the paper cup without flinching, and drank. And he waited, because he knew something they didn't. His radio was still live. And everything, from the arrest, to the slurs, to the jokes, was being recorded. He didn't need to raise his voice. He just needed the world to listen. Marcus didn't sleep. Couldn't. The holding room was dimly lit by a flickering overhead bulb that hummed like a broken promise. The bench under him was little more than a slab of metal, too short to stretch out on, too cold to rest against. His arm, still burned, skin blistering beneath the soot-streaked sleeve of his turnout coat, throbbed with every heartbeat. They hadn't even unbuckled his gear. Hours later, he still wore the same uniform he'd charged into a burning house in. The once heroic image of a firefighter in blackened gear had become, in this small-town jail, a joke. Around midnight, the door creaked open. Marcus blinked against the sudden light from the hallway. Deputy Crowley entered with a sandwich wrapped in wax paper. He tossed it on the floor. Dinner, Captain Courage. Marcus didn't look up. Crowley circled slowly, savoring the silence. You think just cause you ran into a fire, you get to skip the rules? That you get a medal? He leaned in, his breath sour with cheap coffee. You know what I think? I think you've been waiting your whole life to be seen. To be someone. But under all that gear, you're just another boy from the wrong side of town trying to act like he belongs. Marcus stayed quiet. The door slammed shut again. 10 more minutes passed. Then 20. Then the door opened once more. A new deputy entered. Tall, lean, chewing gum like it was a sport. His name tag read S. Myers. He smirked. So this is the savior of Edgewater. Marcus met his eyes. Myers raised his hands mockingly. Don't worry, I'm not here to rough you up. Just thought I'd see what all the fuss is about. Heard the kids you pulled out were white. Must be a first, huh? He chuckled to himself. Bet their daddy's gonna be thrilled when he finds out who dragged him out the fire. Marcus leaned back slowly, wincing at the pressure on his arm. You got something to say? Myers asked. Marcus's voice was calm. You talk a lot for someone who's not asking questions. Myers paused, the smile faltering. But Marcus didn't press. He didn't have to. The man's face told him everything he needed to know. They weren't scared. Not yet. but they were unsure. And uncertainty could crack a system wider than any anger. The door shut again. 2 more hours passed. The pain became dull, more dangerous than sharp. Marcus forced himself to stay awake. He breathed slowly, counted seconds. Every few minutes, the hallway echoed with bursts of laughter, the bark of crude jokes. He caught snippets. Thought he was going to cry when I cuffed him. Could have let him burn. Might have saved us some paperwork. And then, heard the chief is pissed. Wants to make it go away. Too late now. Phones are blowing up. Marcus blinked. That was the first sign. They were starting to feel the heat. He leaned his head back against the concrete wall and closed his eyes just long enough to rest them. That's when the clatter of boots approached. The doors swung open hard, and 3 people entered. Not deputies. Suits. City lawyers. One held a clipboard, another a folder thick with printouts. The third, a woman in her 50s with steel gray hair and eyes to match, didn't carry anything. She just looked at him. The man with the folder cleared his throat. Mr. Lane, I'm city council. We'd like to clarify the events of this afternoon. Marcus didn't move. The woman stepped forward. We're here to document your condition, provide a statement for internal affairs, and advise you of your rights. He looked at her. Then, at the radio still clipped to his turnout code. Still on. Still recording. Marcus didn't speak right away. When he finally did, it was quiet. Now you care. The room went still. He unhooked the radio. Held it up slowly. This caught everything. From the rescue to the cuffs to the jokes about burning me alive. He set it on the bench beside him. Start your documentation with that. The woman's jaw tightened. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a recorder of her own. Then let's begin. The room fell into a sterile silence, the kind that lives in the margins of bureaucracy and guilt. The woman in the steel gray suit clicked on her recorder. The red light blinked, a mechanical heartbeat bearing witness. She didn't flinch at Marcus's burned uniform, didn't offer a chair, didn't ask about the sandwich on the floor or the blood drying at his cuffed wrists. State your full name for the record, she said. Marcus hesitated. Not because he didn't know it, but because he suddenly understood the weight of it, how it had been spoken in dispatches, screamed by neighbors, and now filed into legal reports like a number in a machine. Marcus Darnell Lane. The woman nodded, writing it down. What is your occupation? Lieutenant Firefighter. Edgewater Fire Department. Engine 3. The man beside her scribbled. The other lawyer, clipboard guy, asked for a rundown of the day's events. Marcus recounted it step by step, each moment etched into him like a brand. He detailed the call, the fire, the rescues, the gun, the handcuffs. He left nothing out. And the deputy's response? The woman asked. He drew his weapon, Marcus said. Shouted. Ignored all identifiers on my uniform. Didn't ask who I was. Didn't check my badge or radio. She raised an eyebrow. And you're sure your radio was on? Marcus reached to the bench and tapped the still glowing device. It's been on since I left the station. The lawyers exchanged glances. You're aware this recording may be used in a federal investigation? The man asked. Marcus looked him square in the eye. That's the idea. The session lasted another 30 minutes, covering everything from the time of dispatch to the first word spoken by Deputy Crowley. When it ended, they turned off their recorders and left without saying goodbye. No apology. No reassurance. Just paperwork. An hour later, the door creaked open again. This time, it was Captain Rivas, the firehouse chief. Marcus hadn't seen him since the morning before the call. Rivas looked tired. He stepped in slowly, as if unsure of his right to be there. He wore his uniform but not his badge. His eyes went to Marcus's blistered arm, the cuff marks, the battered helmet still resting beside him. They didn't even take your gear off, he murmured. Nope. I just found out 2 hours ago. I wasn't told. You weren't supposed to be, Marcus interrupted. They wanted to disappear me before it became a problem. Rivas's face twitched. He reached out to sit, then stopped. There's a media storm outside. Video from the scene. The audio. It's bad. Worse than we thought. Department's already getting calls. State inquiry. DOJ oversight. Marcus stayed silent. I came to get you out, Rivas said, holding up a key. They're dropping the hold. No charges. Internal investigation starting immediately. Marcus stood slowly, groaning as pain flared through his arm. Rivas stepped forward, but Marcus waved him off. I've been through worse. He unlatched the door himself. But outside the holding cell, the station didn't look the same. Officers stared but said nothing. The laughter from earlier was gone. Even the air felt heavier, charged with tension. They walked down the hall toward the front desk, and every pair of eyes followed them. At the exit, Rivas paused. You don't have to say anything, Marcus. Not to them. Not to the media. Let it play out. Let the system do what it's supposed to do. Marcus turned to him. I was silent when they shoved me to the ground. Silent when they mocked me. When they talked about letting me burn. That silence didn't protect me. He stepped through the door into a flash of cameras. Outside, under the floodlights of a dozen reporters and the blinking lenses of phones, Marcus Lane stopped, turned to face the crowd, and said, My name is Lieutenant Marcus Lane. I saved 3 lives yesterday. I wore this uniform into a fire. And when I came out, they saw a threat, not a hero. The crowd murmured. Rivas stiffened beside him. But I didn't come here for revenge. I came here to remind every kid in this town, every black boy told to keep his head down, that silence won't save you. But truth just might. And with that, he walked past the flashing lights. He didn't wait for permission. He walked like a man who'd stepped through fire twice. Because he had. The next morning, Edgewater didn't wake up. It was jolted. By 6:42 a.m., Marcus's speech had been clipped, subtitled, and posted by half a dozen major outlets. By 8 o'clock, it was the lead story on every morning show. Headlines called it Hero Arrested, Firefighter in Chains, America's Shame in a Small Texas Town. And Edgewater? It was buzzing like a live wire about to snap. Marcus sat in his kitchen, still in his scorched uniform pants, a loose t-shirt covering the bandages on his arm. He hadn't slept. His phone was filled with messages, reporters, old college friends, people he hadn't heard from in years. His voicemail was full. His inbox crashed, but he ignored all of it. He was watching the live stream of the mayor's emergency press conference. Behind a row of microphones, Mayor Harris adjusted his tie like it was trying to choke him. The camera zoomed in on his pinched face. We are aware of the incident involving Lieutenant Marcus Lane, and we are conducting a full review in cooperation with the Department of Justice. Let me be clear. Edgewater will not tolerate racism or abuse of authority. Marcus leaned forward. The mayor cleared his throat. Effective immediately, Deputy Travis Crowley has been placed on unpaid leave pending investigation. The sheriff's department has also agreed to cooperate fully with federal oversight. The room exploded in questions. None were answered. Marcus muted the volume and sat back. He didn't smile. Didn't even nod. He just stared at the screen until the video froze. Then he shut the laptop. His doorbell rang 10 minutes later. It wasn't press. It wasn't protesters. It was Chief Rivas. Marcus opened the door slowly, not expecting him. Rivas held a box under one arm, his face unreadable. I didn't come to talk, he said. I came to deliver something. Marcus stepped aside. Rivas walked in, set the box on the table. Inside, Marcus's helmet, a fresh turnout coat, a letter, and a black armband. They're organizing a tribute for the kids. City Council wants you there. Public support's exploding. We've got firefighters from Houston, Dallas, even LA calling. They're asking what they can do. Marcus looked down at the coat. His name was already stitched into the chest, but the patch on the shoulder was new. Federal Fire Task Force. What is this? He asked. Rivas exhaled. The Department of Homeland Security reached out. They want you to lead a regional reform council. Training. Oversight. Racial protocol. They want your voice. Marcus blinked. They're offering me a desk. No, Rivas said. They're offering you a megaphone. Marcus didn't answer right away. He touched the patch. Felt the weight of what it meant. I didn't do this for a promotion, he said. I know, Rivas replied. That's why they trust you. That afternoon, Marcus went to the hospital. Not for himself, but to check on the children. The mother met him in the hallway. She didn't speak, just wrapped her arms around him and wept. Inside, the youngest boy was sitting up, watching cartoons. He smiled when he saw Marcus. You were the one with the fire wings, he whispered. Marcus sat beside him, quietly. Outside, news vans lined the curb. But no one approached. Because in that moment, the story wasn't about the fire, or the cuffs, or the cameras. It was about the man who had walked through all of it, and was still standing. And soon, it would be about what he planned to do next. 2 days later, Edgewater was no longer just a dot on the map. It was a symbol, a flashpoint in a national debate about race, authority, and who gets to wear a hero's uniform. Marcus knew the attention wouldn't last forever. The news cycle always moved on. But what came next would determine if this story was just another headline, or the beginning of something bigger. That morning, he stood at the back of a packed community center. The tribute ceremony had overflowed the building. Outside, hundreds gathered in the parking lot, watching on a jumbotron as speakers lined up beside a podium draped in an American flag and a firefighter's helmet. Marcus was scheduled last. The mayor spoke first, then the city council president, then the mother of the children. She didn't cry. Her voice was calm, steady. He didn't ask what color they were. He didn't ask who they belonged to. He just ran in. Inside the hall, there was no applause, just silence, deep and reverent. When Marcus stepped up, the crowd didn't cheer. They stood. He looked out at the sea of faces. Some proud, some ashamed, some unsure. My name is Marcus Lane. You know what happened to me. You saw it. You heard it. You've read the articles, watched the interviews. But I'm not here for more noise. He paused. I'm here because I don't want the next black firefighter, or EMT, or cop, or soldier, to be mistaken for a threat in uniform. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. I've accepted a role with the Department of Homeland Security. I'll be overseeing new racial bias protocols, accountability systems, and reform initiatives across emergency response units in this region. He scanned the room. But I didn't accept this to move papers. I accepted this to change what we tolerate, what we excuse, what we pretend not to see. A woman in the front row wiped her eyes. I may not fix it all, but I will make damn sure the next Marcus Lane doesn't have to prove he's human after saving lives. The crowd rose again, slowly, solemnly. This time, not out of politeness, but because they believed him. Later, after the ceremony, Marcus stood under the shade of a tree outside the building. Rivas joined him, holding 2 paper cups of water. You ready for what's coming next? He asked. Marcus looked at the horizon. No, he said honestly, but I'm not walking away. Behind them, a girl no older than 8 tugged her father's sleeve. Is that him? She whispered. The fireman? The father nodded. She stepped forward, shyly, then handed Marcus a drawing. Crayon and marker. A firefighter with wings, pulling children from fire. Marcus knelt down, smiled. I don't have wings, he said. She nodded seriously. Yes, you do. You just don't see them. And as she walked away, he folded the picture carefully and tucked it into his coat. Because some things, some truths, weren't meant for headlines. They were meant for remembering. And Marcus Lane wasn't done yet. 3 weeks later, Marcus sat in a sleek, glass-walled conference room in Washington, D.C., where polished suits and policy binders had replaced fire gear and smoke. He wasn't used to these rooms, air-conditioned, quiet, controlled, but he understood the stakes. The Department of Homeland Security had flown him in to finalize his new role, Director of Regional Emergency Response Equity, a title that sounded like bureaucracy but carried weight. Behind the title were tools, access, power. The faces around the table were unfamiliar but attentive. Legal advisors, civil rights experts, 2 DHS deputies, and across from him, a woman named Director Elaine Brooks, stern, sharp, and respected. We don't want this to be performative, she said plainly. We want systemic change. You'll have support, staff, a pilot program starting in 5 cities, Edgewater included. Marcus nodded. I'm not here to design more binders. I want consequences tied to policies. Audits, intervention training, public reporting. You'll have them, she said. But back home, not everyone welcomed the news. Edgewater was split. For every person who rallied behind Marcus, there were others simmering. In coffee shops and county Facebook groups, the rhetoric twisted. He's trying to make us look racist. Overreaction to one bad moment. Real heroes don't go political. And quietly, from behind closed doors, he embarrassed us. Now he wants control. One morning, Marcus returned to his truck to find his tires slashed and a note tucked under the windshield wiper. Stay in D.C. He filed the report. Didn't blink. Instead, he met with a group of new recruits from Edgewater's academy. They were young, diverse, eager. Marcus stood in front of them in his new dark blue DHS jacket, his old turnout coat hanging beside the whiteboard. He didn't sugarcoat it. You'll be tested, he told them. Not just by fire, but by fear, by people who look at your skin and see threat instead of service. But that uniform belongs to you. You've earned it. And you do not apologize for existing inside it. One recruit, a Latina woman named Ava Cruz, raised her hand. Sir, do you think it'll ever get better? Marcus paused. Yes, he said, but only if we make it. The next week, he returned to Edgewater's City Hall to testify before the town council. It was packed. Reporters, angry residents, curious ones. The sheriff, newly silent under federal review, wasn't present. Marcus stepped to the microphone. The fire that brought this all to light wasn't just in that house, he said. It was in our institutions. And now we get to decide, do we rebuild stronger or keep pretending the cracks aren't there? Murmurs. Tension. A long pause. A man in the back stood slowly. Older. We're a county maintenance vest. He cleared his throat. My grandson's alive because of you, he said. You got every right to be up there. Silence broke. Applause. Hesitant. Then growing. Marcus nodded once, quietly. Because the hardest part of change isn't surviving the flames. It's staying in the room after the smoke clears and demanding something better. And Marcus Lane was still standing. Marcus Lane hadn't returned to duty, but he hadn't stepped away either. His office was now the in-between space, half firehouse, half federal outpost. Part bulletin board, part battle map. He'd become the bridge between two worlds that rarely spoke and often refused to listen. But for all the attention, the headlines, and the new federal title, Marcus knew something ugly still smoldered beneath the surface of Edgewater. Reform didn't scare people. Accountability did. And someone wanted to scare him back. It started with a phone call in the middle of the night. No voice. Just static. Then, 3 days later, a brick through the window of the community liaison office. Marcus didn't flinch. He filed reports. Logged incidents. Warned his team. But when Ava Cruz, his sharpest recruit, just weeks into her new role, came into the station with her face pale and her hands shaking, he knew the stakes had shifted. They followed me, she said, voice cracking. Last night after training. Black truck. No plates. I took 4 turns. They stayed on me until I hit the freeway. Marcus's jaw clenched. He called in favors. DHS dispatched protective detail. But behind the scenes, he started digging. What he found was more than local backlash. It was a network. An anonymous group calling itself Sovereign Fire. Pushing disinformation online. Threatening whistleblowers. Tied to far-right law enforcement factions in 3 neighboring counties. And worse, they were inside Edgewater. One of the leaked forums bragged about having boots on both sides of the line. Code for infiltrators in both police and fire. Marcus brought the files straight to Director Brooks. She read them without blinking. We move fast, she said. Expose them. We burn this thing out by the roots. Within 72 hours, DHS launched a joint investigation with the FBI. Subpoenas followed. Warrants were served. And a week later, 3 deputies and 1 fire captain were placed on administrative leave pending arrest. Edgewater exploded. City council chambers turned into war zones of public debate. Protesters lined Main Street. Local radio spun conspiracy. News vans returned. Everyone had an opinion, few had facts. Through it all, Marcus stayed steady. He kept training the recruits. He kept walking into rooms where he wasn't wanted. He kept his promises. One morning, after another long night of legal meetings, Marcus found a small envelope slipped under his office door. Inside was a single piece of notebook paper. In blue ink, block letters. You lit this match. Now you burn. He stared at it for a long time, then folded it, placed it in a file marked, Threats, Active. Later that day, during a town hall live stream, he addressed it directly. People think fire destroys. But what it really does, what it's always done, is reveal. It strips everything down to the truth. The question is, can you live with what's left? That clip went viral too. But Marcus didn't care about viral. He cared about fire code being rewritten. About accountability hearings gaining teeth. About the Civil Rights Division finally opening a federal inquiry into systemic racial profiling in Edgewater law enforcement. He wasn't trying to be famous. He was trying to make it impossible for what happened to him, to Ava, to anyone not born holding the right badge or skin tone, to ever happen again. And now the system that tried to erase him was under investigation. The match had been lit. And Marcus Lane? He wasn't the one burning. He was the one holding the torch. It was a clear morning in Edgewater. Blue skies. Birdsong. The kind of day that used to mean peace. But not today. Today, the firehouse was surrounded. Media vans. Protesters. Supporters holding hand-painted signs. Counter-protesters with flags. DHS agents positioned at intersections. It felt like a siege, but what was under attack wasn't a building. It was a lie. Inside, Marcus Lane stood in full uniform, staring at the framed photo wall of every firefighter who had ever served at Station 4. Most were white. A few were black, but only one had almost died for wearing the same uniform. His. The final hearing was minutes away. The Civil Rights Division was in town. The U.S. Attorney's Office had filed formal indictments against 4 officers. The Department of Justice had issued findings: systemic racial bias, abuse of power, and suppression of internal whistleblowing. Edgewater's law enforcement infrastructure was about to be federally overseen, and Marcus was about to speak, one last time. He walked into the chamber slowly, flanked by Ava Cruz and Director Brooks. Every seat was filled. Cameras flashed. The sheriff, silent and suspended, sat at the far end. No badge on his chest. No smug smile. The judge called the session to order. Marcus stepped to the podium. "My name is Marcus Lane," he began, "and I am not here to relive what happened. I'm here to close it." He let the silence stretch. This story was never just about me. It was about the system that allowed me to be tackled in uniform, mocked while in pain, and forgotten until a video forced someone to care. He scanned the room. "I don't want revenge. I want reliability. I want a system that protects the people who protect others. That doesn't decide someone's value by the color of their skin, but by the strength of their actions." A murmur swept through the crowd. "We fix this not with applause, not with panels or photo ops. We fix it by facing who we've been and refusing to be that again." He stepped back. No applause. Just a silence that felt like an exhale after years of holding breath. That afternoon, the Department of Justice issued its reforms: mandatory anti-bias training, oversight boards, whistleblower protections, immediate review of all prior racial profiling cases. 3 months later, Edgewater saw its first black fire chief appointed. Ava Cruz was named Assistant Deputy of Operations. And Marcus Lane, he turned down another promotion. Instead, he founded the Fire Equity Initiative, a national nonprofit focused on diversity, safety, and justice in first responder agencies. He returned to Station 4 only once after that, not to suit up, but to install a new plaque by the front door. In honor of those who fought the fires no one saw until now. Because justice isn't loud. It's lasting. And Marcus Lane had made sure of that. Marcus Lane didn't ask to be a symbol. He just wanted to serve and survive. But sometimes the fire you walk through isn't the fire you're trained for. It's the fire no one prepares you for. And yet he persevered. And he changed everything. If this story touched you, leave a comment below. Tell us, which part hurt the most? What would justice look like in your community? Don't forget to like the video if you think these stories need to be told and shared. And subscribe, because the next story might start with a name you've never heard. But won't forget. Thanks for watching. Stay safe. Be loud. Be human. See you in the next video.